Greetings from the Gaia Reach Sanitariums on the plane of Innistrad, where every single time, Delver of Secrets is going to flip. My name is John from the MTG Thoughtcast, and this is the return of Pack It In. We've been away for a little while, but we're back with the juice for you today. This is a collector booster of Innistrad Remastered. So let's go ahead and get into this and see what we can add into your commander decks. Here we are, back at it again with one of my favorite things to do, Pack It In. We are going to be cracking into this collector booster of Innistrad Remastered and getting as many cards as we can into your commander decks. We've been busy with some of the overstuffed versions of this show for a recent time period. But now here we are back with a single pack, and I'm excited to be back doing this again. It's just, I don't know, just needed a little bit of a break from it for a little while, sort of gather my thoughts onto how to produce this show correctly. So yeah, so we're back at it again. We're here with Innistrad Remastered. I am a big fan of Innistrad. It's not my favorite plane of the multiverse, but it has enough of the really cool characteristics behind it of like the gothic horror and the monsters and spooky nature, especially the zombies and the spirits and even honestly the humans and the angels. It's like a big part of the sort of culture of what Innistrad is. I was not playing back during the original block, but especially the Shadows of Innistrad block, the set Shadows and Eldritch Moon, those were very big highlights for me. I was collecting a lot of that set, played a little bit of Standard back then, had a very fun white-blue Spirits deck that I used in Standard during that time frame, so that block in specific is very special to me, and this is one of my wife's favorite sets as well, hence why we went out and got some of this today. And I'm going to be opening it here for you, for your entertainment. So, and I believe correctly, we're going to be starting from this back end here, and it should work our way up to the rares. Guardian of Pilgrims, 1 in a blue, 2/2, Spirit Cleric. When this creature enters, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Neat, super cool, blinkable, can be repeated, is a spirit. It doesn't fly though, interestingly, I just now noticed. It doesn't have flying on it. That's quite odd. Usually a lot of the Innistrad spirits have flying, but not this one, I guess. Battleground Geist. 4 in a blue for a 3/3 spirit with flying. It gives other spirit creatures you control +1/+0. Works very well with this other spirit that we just opened previously, give it an additional power boost. That's super cool. Big fan of that. Well, we got a double face card coming up here soon, so don't worry about that right now. But for the moment, Evolving Wilds. Classic Evolving Wilds. This art in specific, this art has not really appeared much on any other Evolving Wilds, so to be able to have more copies with this art in specific, the creeping vines go up the cathedral, it's really, really cool. This one is my wife's favorite version of Evolving Wilds, so glad to have some copies of that, especially in foil as well. Everybody loves a good foil land. Oops, spoilers because of how Innistrad is, we've got double face cards, but let's start with the front half here of Conduit of Storms. 2 in a red for a 2/3 werewolf horror that when it attacks, you add red at the beginning of your next main phase this turn, and then for 5 mana, you can transform it, and it'll transform into the Conduit of Emrakul. A 5/4 Eldrazi werewolf that whenever this creature attacks, add colorless at the beginning of your next main phase this turn. Yeah, so this is one of the transformable werewolves that came out of the Eldritch Moon set, and very interestingly about this, once you're able to transform it back to this back half, it has no way to convert back to its front face naturally on the battlefield. Obviously, if it were to die or go back to your hand, it goes back as the front face because that's just how the nature of double face cards work. It's neat. I kind of wish this had haste, that like you could cast it for 3, go in immediately, and then you got that red during your next main, but I suppose if you're doing a werewolf deck, you could be doing worse than this. Just a werewolf that on attack, no matter which side it's on, gives you mana. That's always useful for big decks. Stenzia Masquerade. 2 and a red for an enchantment. Attacking creatures you control have first strike. That's pretty good with the werewolf that we just did. Whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then this enchantment has Madness for 2 and a red. Madness is a very cool ability that if you were to discard the card, you get an opportunity to cast the card as it is being discarded. So, if this is something that you are pitching to an effect that says you discard a card, say Blood, which is very, very cool. Like if you crack a Blood token and discard this to the Blood token, you then get a trigger to pay the Madness. And Madness is very cool because you can activate it off turn, or like the cards can be cast at not sorcery speed. So this is an enchantment that you could pitch to something and just get down on the battlefield for free. Like say in the middle of combat that like you're swinging with your vampires. Oops, I'll discard this to a Blood token. Here comes Stenzia Masquerade. Now they're all gonna be bigger. Very, very cool. I like Madness a lot. Masquerade actually is also a very, very fun card in a vampire shell. Outside of that, I'm not really sure. Wild Hunger. 2 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+1, is that? Yes, +3/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. And it has Flashback for 3 and a red. Flashback is an all-time classic, just giving you extra value for spells as you cast them. It's like getting 2 for 1 BOGO. The fact that this is a 2-color card though, unfortunately, because the flashback cost is red, so you can only have this in a Gruul deck at least. It's fine. It's definitely good for a combat-focused deck in, say, the draft environment for this, but unless you're a red-green shell that cares specifically about flashback costs, it's probably not an amazing pick. Covetous Castaway, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human, that when it dies, you mill 3 cards. And then it has Disturb. Disturb is an activated ability, or not even an ability, I'm sorry, you cast it. You can cast it from your graveyard, transformed for its Disturb cost. And Disturb creatures, they either are already the undead and then are disturbed and then they come back as enchantments, or in the case of this one, it comes back as a 3/4 spirit, that when it enters, you may shuffle up to 3 target cards from your graveyard into your library. And then if this guy would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, he gets exiled. So it's kind of like creature flashback, if that makes any sense, because the flashback, when you do that, it sends the card off in exile. So it's very neat. It's an interesting way to do double face cards that come out of your graveyard. I'm a big fan of it. Castaway as a whole is fine. He doesn't do anything the turn he comes in. You do actively want to kill him when he comes down into play. And then the recursion side as the spirit, while yes, it is decently big as a 3/4, not getting those cards into your hand, instead getting them back into your library, that's not as crazy useful as you would think it is. But I don't know, you could do worse, I suppose, than Castaway. We've got ourselves a Retro Plains. It is in foil, by the way. I don't know if that's coming across super well, but that is the retro foil. I want to say this art is from the original Innistrad set. It doesn't look like one of the Shadows ones, but it's very neat. The art selection that came from those sets actually do look pretty decent in the retro frame. I'm not here to make a case one way or the other on whether this set should have had retro frames, but that's just kind of the nature of how the remaster products have been working. So we have it. It's here. It is what it is. But speaking of retro, we also have Cathar Commando. Recently just came back in Foundations, if I'm not mistaken. 1 and a white for a 3/1 human soldier with flash, and for a mana, sacrifice it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Very, very cool. It's multifunction. It has flash, so you could have it come in at somebody's end step, and then it's ready to go swinging if need be, if like the board is pretty open. Relatively early, you get this down turn 2, sometimes turn 1 if you have the right mana acceleration. And then when it stops being useful in combat, it is a deterrent for any troublesome artifacts or enchantments, right? We've seen cards like these on stuff like Thrashing Brontodon, who is also very, very good. is obviously not quite Reclamation Sage. It's like Reclamation Sage in a couple investments, but I like the Commando because if relatively early you could start pressuring damage on somebody who does not have any blockers quite yet, and then when it does stop being useful, you've got the activation of being able to take care of a stubborn artifact or enchantment. It's very cool. It's not a card I play, but I definitely could see somebody playing it. We got another retro card, Vile Spawn Spider. Green-blue for a 2/3 spider with reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. And 2 green-blue tap, sack, create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. Activate only as a sorcery. This is kind of a creature callback version to a card that is also in this set, the Spider Spawning. It will create you tokens equal to the amount of creatures you've got in your graveyard. This also is just a continual mill for the decks that want to do that kind of thing. Green-blue is very good at utilizing pieces out of its graveyard. It's fine. I mean, it's a 2/3 with reach, so it blocks spirits very well, or any other cheap flyers relatively early. Filling your graveyard is a very useful trait to have, and then when it does suck that its activated ability it has at the bottom is sorcery speed, so you can't like chump and sack to prevent damage and make tokens, but I mean, it's gotta have some kind of downside, I suppose, but it's cool. It's not a card I've played, but it does suck that it is in green-blue and not green-black, so you can put it in like the Ishkana deck. That's unfortunate, but here we've got another retro card. This one is in foil. This is the Dauntless Cathar. 2 and a white for a 3/2 human soldier. For 1 and a white, and exile it from your graveyard. Create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, only as a sorcery. So as a similar to the Castaway, it's like creature flashback, that this comes in, does its thing for a little while, dies, or you sacrifice it in some capacity, and then later on you remove it from your graveyard, triggering anything that cares about a card leaving your graveyard, and makes you another body to use either for combat or sacrifice purposes or things like that. It's neat. Creatures that can do multiple creatures outside, like contained within themselves, is very, very cool. I don't know if it's amazing, but it's neat all the same. We've our first rare of Bloodhall Priest. 2 black and a red, 4/4 Vampire Cleric. When this creature enters or attacks, if you have no cards in hand, this creature deals 2 damage to any target. And then it has Madness for 1 black and a red. Hellbent, a Hellbent style creature that once you go empty-handed, this goes swinging. You can just start shocking whatever you need to, just as long as you have no cards in hand. It's fine, I suppose. It gives you something to be working towards if you happen to have no gas in your hand, and the fact that this could come down earlier on curve, right? You see there that its madness cost is cheaper than its mana value itself. So if you are relatively early and you pitch this to an effect and then can get it down for 3, especially if you are constantly discarding cards or just burning through your deck really, really fast. I suppose a burn deck would be very, very useful for something like this, because those kind of decks start to run out of gas very, very quickly. So then you've got this vampire, also firstly a vampire as well, so synergistic with any of those kindred style decks, but useful that you could start taking out small creatures or just start doing extra damage to face if you are Hellbent. I'm a fan of that. That's super cool. Retro border of Lysash Forgotten Archangel. 2 double white and a black. Legendary 4/5 Angel. Flying lifelink. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step, and if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. It's reminiscent of like the Praetors, kind of, where it gives a boon to you and a hindrance to your opponents as well. This reminds me also a lot of Athreos, God of Passage, that has the ability to recur your creatures right back to hand unless an opponent pays life. But this is very, very similar to that. You have to obviously wait until your end step, but you get Lysa down and set up this engine of like, I'll eat my board to this Ashnod's altar or whatever, and your Blood Artist is triggering constantly every single time that goes, and then at your end step they all come right back to your hand, and then you can cast them all again the next turn, start repeating the cycle over and over and over again. And in the same regard, anybody else trying to do the same thing, this is acting as a Leyline of the Void, where all of their creatures are going to immediately go to exile if they were to die. That's very, very powerful. On a 4/5 with lifelink as well, will keep you alive. It's neat. I think it's very, very cool. I don't know if this is as strong as the original Lysa card from Commander Legends, but this one is very, very cool. I'm a very big fan of this one. We do have a spoiler for our next card, though. It is a double face, and it is Huntmaster of the Fells in a showcase frame, also downshifted to rare, I've noticed. Huntmaster used to always be mythic, but now he's down to rare. 2 red and a green, 2/2 human werewolf. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Huntmaster, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token, and you gain 2 life. And at each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, you transform it. And it transforms into Ravager of the Fells, a 4/4 werewolf with trample, that whenever this creature transforms into Ravager, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker, and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature that player or that planeswalker's controller controls. Wow, what a wordy block of text. And then at each upkeep, if a player casts 2 or more spells, he transforms. So unlike some of the other old transform werewolves, this thing always has something to do on either side as it transforms, right? Huntmaster makes you more wolves as it turns back into its human side, and then if you can keep it on its werewolf side, it flips back into that and just starts shooting down damage. So it's like, it is probably the best payoff for you not casting spells. Like, kind of what you want to do is it wants to be Huntmaster as it's going around the table, and then on your turn you do no spells, transforms into Ravager, shoot down the things that are being problematic to you, and then during your opponent's turn it turns back into Huntmaster, creates you more wolves, gains you more life. It's neat. I've never truthfully been a huge fan of werewolves, but if you have to play werewolves, this is probably one of the best ones that you can have in your deck. Very, very cool. See him here in the showcase frame. I love the artwork from there. Before we hit our last card, we've got ourselves a token. It's a elemental and a human, so that's very cool. And our last card is a foil borderless Heartless Summoning. It's 1 and a black for an enchantment. Creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast, and creatures you control get -1/-1. So a double-edged boon kind of thing, where you drop the cost of creatures that you cast, however you are deliberately shrinking their power and toughness, which can be a hindrance if you need to play some early utility creatures, even some that have a upped toughness that don't immediately die to this, right? Like, you're shrinking a 3 power thing down to a 3 toughness, excuse me. You're bringing like 3 toughness down to 2, or 2 toughness down to 1. You can't get mana dorks down with this anymore. However, the benefit of being able to drop the cost of all your creatures by 2 for 2 mana to play, this is a very, very cool card. It's got some combo synergies behind it. If you're doing anything that's big dumb in especially like black or green, that like you don't necessarily care how big your creatures are, like this actually just came up into mind with one of the this was actually a rare that my wife just opened from one of these packs as well, and we were talking about this card for her, Razaketh the Foul-Blooded, where Razaketh is a extremely powerful commander if you can get it down. The point is, you have to ramp out to him as quickly as possible, and his strongest attributes come on his activated ability, not necessarily his power and toughness. So a card like Heartless Summoning works extremely well for a card like that, where you can just ramp to your big boy monster or something else really dumb that you don't really care how big it is. I can imagine this probably being really, really good also with like these Eldrazi decks that we've been seeing recently as well. Things like Ulalek or the new cycle, like if you were to put Eldrazi's inside a colored build of some kind, like those new Titans that came from Modern Horizons 3, or maybe you're like a black focused artifact shell, you can use this to ramp up the things like Blightsteel Colossus and whatever. It's super, super cool. If you don't care about the power and toughness shrink, this is an amazing cost reducer for creature decks. If we go ahead and examine the pack we've got here, the stuff that I would put into a commander deck, we've already gone on quite the ramble for Heartless Summoning. I feel like that is incredible in most any black deck if you can bypass the fact that it'll shrink your 1/1s. But apart from that, I do like Battleground Geist a lot. Just being able to boost any spirits that you have in play. If you're already doing a Kindred style theme for spirits, Battleground Geist is a very fun one to have. Lysa is probably the funnest commander that we open from here. I guess it would actually be the only commander we open from here, but Lysa's very, very fun. And, I mean, you can never turn down a good Evolving Wilds, right? Pauper playable, just a classic, cheap fetch land. Always good to see this art again. I'm a very big fan of it, so that's what we got from this pack. And that will do it for today's episode of Pack It In. Thank you so much for watching and cracking into this pack with me. Let me know down below if you have opened any Innistrad Remastered yet and what you got from your packs. What would you be playing from Innistrad Remastered? And we'll see you all next time on the next episode of Pack It In.